The first thing Jake felt was pain shooting through his left leg like lightning. His eyes opened slowly and everything looked wrong. The walls around him sparkled like diamonds, but they felt cold and hard when he touched them. Where was he? Days ago, Jake had been fixing engines on a medical transport ship. They were carrying life-saving medicine to a small colony on the edge of space. He remembered the sudden attack. Pirates came out of nowhere, their ships black as night. Last thing he saw was fire and twisted metal before everything went dark. Now he was trapped in what looked like a crystal cage. His leg throbbed with every heartbeat, and his chest felt tight when he breathed. Someone had bandaged his wounds, but just barely. They wanted him alive but not comfortable. "Finally awake, are we?" a voice said from outside his cell. Jake looked up, and his jaw dropped. The creature standing there was unlike anything he had ever seen. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, with smooth blue skin that shimmered like oil on water. 4 arms moved gracefully as it spoke, each one decorated with golden rings. Its eyes were large and completely black, like staring into deep space. "I am Lord Vexthera," the alien said, his voice smooth but cold. "Welcome aboard my ship, the Sovereignty's Edge. You are my newest investment." Jake tried to stand, but his injured leg buckled. "Investment? What are you talking about?" The alien laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Humans are such interesting creatures, so weak yet so stubborn. You will provide excellent entertainment for my guests." As Jake's eyes adjusted to the strange light, he could see through the crystal walls of his cell. The ship was massive, filled with floating platforms and glowing decorations. Aliens of different shapes and sizes walked around in fancy clothes, drinking from crystal cups and laughing loudly. It looked like the most expensive party in the galaxy. "This is a casino ship," Vexthera explained, noticing Jake's stare. "The wealthy from across the Empire come here to gamble, drink, and watch the blood games." "Blood games?" Jake's stomach dropped. "Gladiator fights, my dear human. Captured beings like yourself fight for their freedom. The guests place bets on who will live and who will ... not. The alien's black eyes seemed to sparkle with cruel amusement. Jake felt sick. "You can't be serious." "Oh, but I am. And you, my injured little friend, are the perfect underdog." The betting pools are already buzzing with excitement. A wounded human against trained warriors? The odds are quite entertaining. Another figure approached the cell, and Jake's breath caught. This alien was different. Female, he thought, with the same blue skin but more elegant features. She wore a flowing silver dress that seemed to move like liquid mercury. Her presence made even the arrogant lord step back slightly. "My wife, Lady Serana," Vexthera said with less warmth than before. "She represents the celestial court, the highest level of our society." Lady Serana studied Jake with intelligent silver eyes. There was something in her gaze, not cruelty like her husband, but something else. Sadness. Hope. Jake couldn't tell. "The human looks half dead already," she said, her voice like music. "Are you certain he will provide adequate sport?" "My dear wife, that's exactly what makes it interesting. Our guests love to bet on impossible odds. This broken creature fighting for his life will be the highlight of our entertainment season." Jake realized he was just a toy to these people. A thing to bet on, but as he watched the interaction between the married couple, he noticed something strange. They stood far apart. When Vexthera spoke to his wife, she looked away. When she answered, her voice held no warmth.
"Ow."
"This wasn't a loving marriage. It was business. What happens if I refuse to fight?" Jake asked. Vexthera's laugh was even crueler this time. "Refuse? Oh, my dear human, you misunderstand. You don't have a choice. Fight and perhaps win your freedom. Refuse and become a permanent slave in our work camps. Either way, you belong to me now." The alien lord began explaining the rules like he was discussing the weather. Jake would face 3 opponents over the next several days. Each one would be stronger and more dangerous than the last. If he somehow survived all 3 fights, he would earn his freedom. If not, well, the alternative was clear. Your first opponent will be a Drachmo Vexthera, continued cheerfully. Lovely creatures, really, about the size of your earth bears, with claws that can cut through steel and venom that causes the most interesting paralysis. Jake's hands started shaking. He was an engineer, not a fighter. He fixed machines and solved technical problems. How could he possibly survive against alien monsters? The second fight will feature a Korath warrior, the Lord went on. They're cybernetically enhanced, you see? Machine, part warrior, all violence. Quite fascinating to watch them work. And the third, Jake managed to ask? My personal champion, Gorvik, the Titanborn. He has never lost a fight. Ever. Vexthera's black eyes gleamed. The betting pools will go absolutely wild. As the two aliens walked away, Jake caught Lady Serana looking back at him. For just a moment, their eyes met, and he saw something that gave him the tiniest spark of hope. She looked like someone who understood what it meant to be trapped. The crystal walls of his cell hummed softly as night fell on the ship. Jake lay on the hard floor, his leg aching and his future looking impossible. Somewhere above him, wealthy aliens were probably already placing bets on how quickly he would die. But Jake had survived a pirate attack that killed everyone else on his ship. He had lived through injuries that should have ended him. Maybe he could find a way to survive this too. He had to. Because giving up wasn't in his nature. Even when everything seemed hopeless, the ship continued its journey through space, carrying its cargo of predators, prey, and secrets toward an uncertain destination. The next morning, Jake woke up to the sound of metal clanging against crystal. A short, grumpy-looking alien with gray skin and 6 arms was shoving weapons through a slot in his cell wall. Get up, human, the creature growled. Right time for training. I'm cruel, and I'm supposed to keep you alive long enough to put on a good show. Jake struggled to his feet, his injured leg screaming in protest. Training? You mean you're actually going to help me? Krull snorted, which sounded like a rusty. Engines starting up? Help. Out. Don't get the wrong idea, meatbag. Lord Vexthera wants you to last more than 5 minutes in the arena. Makes for better betting if the crowd thinks you might have a chance. The weapons were strange. Some looked like swords, others like clubs, and a few Jake couldn't even identify. They were all too heavy, too awkward, nothing like the tools he was used to working with. Pick one, Krull said impatiently. Jake chose what looked like the simplest weapon, a metal rod about the length of his arm. It felt clumsy in his hands, but at least he could swing it without falling over. Terrible choice, Krull muttered. But then again, you're going to lose anyway. For the next few hours, Krull taught Jake the basics. How to hold a weapon without cutting himself. How to move without tripping. How to block an attack without breaking his arms. It was embarrassing how bad Jake was at everything. You fight? Like a baby learning to walk, Krull said after Jake fell down for the 10th time. What did you do before you became entertainment? I fixed things, Jake panted, sitting on the floor. Engines, computers, machines. I solved problems. Well, your biggest problem now is staying alive, Krull replied. And I don't think you can fix that with a wrench. While Jake was struggling with basic combat moves, the real drama was happening elsewhere on the ship. In the grand dining hall, hundreds of wealthy aliens were gathered for their evening feast. The room was enormous, with floating tables and chairs that adjusted to each alien's unique body shape. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow lights across the scene. Lord Vexthera sat at the head table, wearing his finest robes and acting like the king of the universe. He was telling jokes and laughing loudly, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. The betting on Jake's fights had reached incredible amounts, and everyone wanted to hear from the human's owner. My lords and ladies, Vexthera announced, standing up with his wine glass raised. I have been overwhelmed by your enthusiasm for tomorrow's entertainment. The betting pools have exceeded all expectations. The crowd cheered and raised their own glasses. These aliens loved their gambling almost as much as they loved showing off their wealth. In fact, Vexthera continued, his voice getting louder. I am so confident in the outcome that I wish to make a special wager of my own. The room grew quiet. When someone as wealthy as Lord Vexthera made a personal bet, it was always something spectacular. Lady Serana, sitting beside her husband at the head table, kept her face perfectly calm. But Jake would have noticed if he could see her, that her hands were gripping her wine glass so tightly her knuckles had turned white. "I wager," Vexthera said dramatically, pausing to let the tension build. "My wife's freedom." The silence that followed was so complete, you could hear the ship's engines humming in the background. Then the room exploded with shocked gasps and excited chatter. "If this broken human somehow manages to survive all 3 contests," Vexthera announced over the noise, "Lady Serana will be free to dissolve our marriage contract and claim her full inheritance." Now the crowd was laughing and cheering like this was the funniest joke they'd ever heard. The idea of a wounded human beating 3 trained killers was so ridiculous it was hilarious. Several aliens were already pulling out their communication devices to spread the news across the galaxy. Lady Serana still hadn't moved. Her silver eyes stared straight ahead, but inside, her heart was racing. This bet represented something she had dreamed of for years, freedom from a marriage that was slowly destroying her. You see, their marriage wasn't about love. It was about politics and power. Vexthera had married her to gain access to the Celestial Court, the highest level of alien society. Serana brought him respect and connections he could never earn on his own. In return, she was supposed to be the perfect, obedient wife. But Vexthera was cruel and controlling. He monitored everything she did, everyone she spoke to. Worse, Jake didn't know this yet, but the Lord had been slowly poisoning his wife's food for months. Nothing deadly, just enough to keep her weak and compliant. 8. Traditional divorce was impossible under their laws, especially when one spouse was being chemically controlled. "You're insane," whispered Lord Corvin, an old friend sitting nearby. "If you lose this bet, you lose everything." Vexthera's laugh was full of confidence. "Lose, my dear friend. Have you seen the human? He can barely stand. My champion Gorvik could defeat him with one hand tied behind his back." "But what if?" Corvin started. "There is no what if," Vexthera interrupted. "A pathetic creature will be dead before the 3rd fight even begins. This wager is just theater, a way to make the games more exciting for our guests." The betting immediately went wild. Aliens were placing enormous wagers not just on Jake's fights, but on whether Vexthera would actually honor his promise, if the impossible happened. The ship's casino had never seen so much money changing hands. Later that night, after the celebration had died down, Lady Serana did something very dangerous. She waited until her husband was deep asleep, then quietly made her way to the lower levels of the ship. Jake was lying on his cell floor, every muscle in his body aching from Cruel's training. His leg was throbbing, and he was starting to realize just how hopeless his situation really was. "Human," a soft voice called from outside his cell. Jake looked up to see Lady Serana standing in the shadows. She had changed from her fancy dinner dress into simple dark clothes, and she kept looking over her shoulder like she was afraid of being caught. "Lady Serana, what are you doing here?" "I came to examine the merchandise," she said loudly, in case anyone was listening. Then she stepped closer and lowered her voice to barely a whisper. "But really, I came to give you this." She slid a small, flat device through the bars, something that looked like a thin piece of metal, but felt warm to the touch. "What is it?" Jake whispered back. "Information," she replied quietly. "Details about your opponents, strengths, weaknesses, fighting styles. Everything my husband's trainers have recorded about them." Jake stared at the device in amazement. "Why would you help me?" Lady Serana was quiet for a long moment. "Because," she finally whispered, "this bet is my only chance at freedom. My husband has been controlling me for a long time. If you somehow win, I can finally escape." "But you don't think I can actually do it?" Jake said. It wasn't a question. Her silver eyes met his through the crystal bars. "I think you're braver than you know. Sometimes that's enough." Before Jake could ask what she meant, Lady Serana was gone, disappearing back into the shadows like she was never there. Jake looked down at the device in his hands. It might be the difference between life and death. For the first time since waking up in this crystal prison, Jake felt something. Besides fear and despair, he felt hope. It was small and fragile, but it was real. Tomorrow, the real test would begin. Jake spent the entire night studying the information Lady Serana had given him. The device projected holographic images that showed his opponents in detail. What he saw made his stomach turn. The Drachma looked like someone had crossed a bear with a dragon and given it a really bad attitude. It was covered in dark scales, had claws longer than kitchen knives, and teeth that could probably bite through steel. According to the files, its venom didn't just paralyze victims, it made them feel every moment of what happened next. Great, Jake muttered to himself. Just great. But as he studied the creature more carefully, his engineer's mind started working. Everything had weak points. Every machine had flaws. Maybe living things were the same way. The next morning came. Too quickly. Jake was awakened by the sound of hundreds of voices cheering and laughing. Today was fight day. The ship's passengers were ready for entertainment. Krul appeared at his cell with what passed for breakfast. Some kind of gray paste that tasted like cardboard mixed with disappointment. Eat up, the trainer said. You'll need energy to run around the arena before that thing catches you. Thanks for the confidence boost, Jake replied, forcing down the awful food. I'm not paid to boost confidence. I'm paid to keep you alive long enough to make the show interesting. Speaking of which, here's your weapon. Krul handed him the same metal rod from yesterday's training. It felt even more useless now that Jake knew what he'd be facing. The arena was unlike anything Jake had ever imagined. It was a massive sphere, completely enclosed, with no up or down. Gravity seemed to work in all directions, meaning the fight could happen on any surface. Walls, ceiling, wherever. Floating platforms provided places to stand, but they moved constantly, shifting the battlefield every few seconds. Hundreds of alien spectators sat in, protected. Viewing areas that floated around the outside of the sphere. They were drinking, laughing, and placing last-minute bets. To them, this was just entertainment. To Jake, it was life or death. Lord Vexera sat in the place of honor, wearing his finest robes and grinning like he'd already won. Lady Serana sat beside him, her face perfectly calm, but Jake caught her glancing at him with what might have been encouragement. Ladies and gentlemen, announced the arena's host, a tall alien with 4 arms and a voice like thunder. Welcome to today's first contest. In the red corner, we have the Drachma, 8 feet of pure predator, with a perfect record of 37 victories. The crowd cheered as a section of the arena wall opened. The Drachma emerged slowly, its yellow eyes scanning the space. For prey, it was even bigger than the hologram had shown. And in the blue corner, the host continued. We have the human Jake, wounded, untrained. And given odds of 1,000 to 1 against survival, the crowd laughed and cheered even louder. Someone threw popcorn. Jake stepped onto one of the floating platforms, his injured leg already aching. The platform was about 10 feet across, enough room to stand, but not much more. Other platforms floated nearby, some close enough to jump to, others too far away. Let the games begin, the host shouted. The Drachma didn't waste time. It leaped from platform to platform with incredible speed, its claws leaving deep scratches. In the metal surfaces, Jake barely managed to jump away as the creature landed where he'd been standing a second before. The crowd was loving it. Every time Jake narrowly escaped the creature's attacks, they cheered louder. This was exactly what they'd paid to see, a hopeless human running for his life. But Jake wasn't just running randomly. He was watching, learning, calculating. The platforms moved in a pattern not random at all, but following a specific sequence. The gravity fields that controlled them had to be generated by machines. And machines followed rules. The Drachma cornered him on a platform near the arena's edge. There was nowhere left to run. The creature's claws extended, venom dripping from the tips, and it prepared to end the fight. That's when Jake noticed something crucial. The platform he was standing on was directly above one of the gravity generators. He could see the energy patterns flowing through the transparent arena wall. More importantly, he could see what would happen when the gravity field shifted in 3.2.1. Jake threw himself flat against the platform just as the gravity field reversed. The Drachma, caught mid-lip, suddenly found itself falling upward instead of down. His claws scraped uselessly against empty air as it tumbled toward the arena's ceiling. But Jake wasn't done. He had studied the pattern, and he knew exactly when the gravity would shift again. As the confused Drachmo tried to orient itself on what was now the floor above him, Jake grabbed his metal rod and waited. The gravity shifted again. Now, the Drachma was falling toward Jake's platform, but it was completely off balance. Tumbling through the air with no control, Jake didn't try to fight the creature directly. Instead, he positioned his rod like a lever against the platform's edge and used the Drachma's own momentum against it. The creature hit the rod at full speed, and the leverage sent it spinning toward the arena wall. The impact was tremendous. The Drachma hit the wall so hard that the entire arena shook. When the dust cleared, the creature was unconscious, its own claws buried deep in the metal wall where its momentum had driven them. The arena fell completely silent. No one moved. No one even seemed to be breathing. Then slowly one alien started clapping, then another. Soon the entire crowd was on their feet, cheering and screaming in amazement. They had just witnessed something impossible, a wounded human. Defeating a creature that had never lost a fight, Lord Vexthera's confident smile had completely disappeared. His black eyes were wide with shock, and for the first time since Jake had met him, the arrogant lord looked worried. 3 days later came the second fight. The Korath warrior was a different kind of opponent entirely, where the Drachma had been pure animal instinct. The Korath was cold intelligence, mixed with cybernetic enhancement. The warrior stood 7 feet tall, half of its body replaced by advanced machinery. Its left arm was entirely mechanical, equipped with energy weapons that could punch holes through steel. Its right eye had been replaced with a targeting computer that never missed. "This should be quick," Vexthera muttered to his wife. His confidence was returning. A lucky victory over an animal was one thing, but against a trained warrior with high-tech equipment, impossible. The second arena was smaller, more like a traditional fighting ring. No shifting gravity this time, just Jake, the Korath, and nowhere to run. The warrior attacked immediately, its energy weapons lighting up the arena with bright flashes. Jake dove and rolled, barely avoiding blasts that left smoking holes in the arena floor. But again, Jake was thinking like an engineer. All those cybernetic implants had to be powered by something. All that advanced technology had to communicate. Somehow, and where there was technology, there were always ways to interfere with it. During his years fixing ships, Jake had learned that the more advanced a system was, the more ways it could break. The Korath's implants were impressive, but they were also vulnerable to electromagnetic interference. Jake had noticed something during his first moments in the arena. The warrior's targeting computer flickered slightly every time it fired its energy weapons. The power drain was causing momentary system instabilities. So instead of trying to avoid the attacks, Jake started encouraging them. He stayed just close enough to make the warrior keep firing, forcing it to drain its power systems faster and faster. The Korath was too focused on the hunt to notice what was happening. Its targeting computer was becoming less accurate. Its movements were getting slightly jerky as the cybernetic systems struggled with power fluctuations. When Jake judged the moment was right, he did something that shocked everyone watching. He grabbed a piece of metal debris from the arena floor and threw it directly at the warrior's energy weapon just as it fired. The result was spectacular. The weapon's energy blast hit the metal debris and created a massive electrical feedback loop. The electromagnetic pulse surged through the Korath's entire cybernetic system. Overloading circuits and crashing computer programs, the warrior collapsed, its mechanical parts sparking and smoking. It wasn't dead, but its cybernetic enhancements were completely fried. Without its technological advantages, the Korath was just another defeated opponent. The crowd went absolutely wild. 2 impossible victories in a row. The betting pools were in chaos as aliens who had laughed at Jake's chances suddenly found themselves either very rich or very poor. Lord Vexthera was no longer just worried, he was terrified. His reputation, his political connections, his entire way of life depended on Jake losing the final fight. But after 2 miraculous victories, even his own supporters were starting to doubt the outcome. Lady Serana watched her husband's growing panic with carefully hidden satisfaction. For the first time in years, she could imagine what freedom might feel like. But everyone knew the real test was still coming. Gorvik, the Titanborn, had never lost a fight, never even come close to losing. If Jake somehow survived the final contest, it would be the greatest upset in gladiatorial history. The question was, did Jake have one more miracle left in him? The 3 days between Jake's second victory and the final fight were the strangest of his life. Suddenly, he wasn't just entertainment anymore, he was a phenomenon. Aliens who had never heard of humans before were talking about the little engineer who had done the impossible twice. Lord Vexthera was falling apart. The confident, cruel noble had become a nervous wreck. He changed the arena rules 4 times, trying to give his champion every possible advantage. He demanded better weapons for Gorvik, even tried to have Jake's food drugged but his own. Ship's doctors reported him to the Gaming Commission for cheating. "Sir, you're making yourself look desperate," one of his advisors warned. "The other nobles are starting to question your judgment." "My judgment?" Vexthera snapped. "My judgment was perfect until this miserable human started defying the laws of nature." The truth was, Vexthera's political enemies were circling like sharks. Lords and ladies who had pretended to respect him for years were now openly mocking his foolish bet. Some were even secretly hoping Jake would win, just to watch the arrogant noble fall from grace. Meanwhile, Lady Serana remained perfectly composed in public, but privately she was amazed. Could this human actually do it? Could he really win her? Freedom. She had lived in despair for so long that hope felt like a foreign emotion. Jake spent those 3 days preparing for what everyone knew would be his final fight. Cruel, his grumpy trainer, had actually started to believe in him. "I've been training gladiators for 20 years, Cruel admitted as they practiced. "I've never seen anyone think their way out of death like you do."
"I'm not thinking my way out,"
Jake replied, dodging a practice swing. "I'm just trying to understand how everything works. Every system has weaknesses. Even Gorvik." Jake paused. That was the question that kept him awake at night. Gorvik, the Titanborn, wasn't a machine or an animal following instincts. He was a thinking warrior with decades of experience and skin that could stop bullets. On the day before the final fight, Jake got an unexpected visitor. A massive figure approached his cell, moving so quietly that Jake didn't notice until a deep voice spoke, "Human." Jake looked up and his heart stopped. Gorvik, the Titanborn, stood outside his cell, and he was even more intimidating up close. Gladiator was 12 feet tall with gray skin that looked like living stone. His arms were as thick as tree trunks, and his eyes were surprisingly intelligent. "You were the one who defeated the Drachma and the Korith," Gorvik said. Wasn't a question. "Yeah," Jake managed to say, "that was me. I watched both fights." "You do not fight like a warrior." Jake's stomach dropped. "I know. I'm not really a fighter at all." "No," Gorvik said thoughtfully. "You fight like something else. Something ... clever. I have never faced an opponent like you," the giant warrior was quiet for a long moment, studying Jake with those intelligent eyes. "I want you to know," Gorvik finally continued, "that I respect what you have accomplished. But tomorrow, I will do everything in my power to defeat you. It is what I was born to do." "I understand," Jake said. "Can I ask you something?" "Speak. Why do you fight? Are you a slave like me?" Gorvik's expression darkened slightly. "I fight because it is my purpose. I was created in a laboratory designed to be the perfect gladiator. I have no family, no home, no life beyond these arenas. Fighting is all I know." Jake felt a wave of sadness for this massive warrior. At least Jake had memories of freedom. Oh, fixing ships and solving problems. Gorvik had never known anything but violence. "I will make your death quick," Gorvik promised, as he turned to leave. "You have earned that much respect." The final day arrived like a storm. The ship's casino was packed beyond capacity. Aliens had traveled from across the galaxy to witness what many were calling the fight of the century. The betting had reached astronomical levels. with some nobles wagering entire planets on the outcome. The arena for the final fight was different from the others. It was a massive maze of platforms, walls, and obstacles, designed to showcase gladiatorial skill rather than lucky tricks. There were places to hide, weapons scattered throughout, and multiple levels of combat space. Jake stood at the entrance wearing simple armor that felt heavy and awkward. His injured leg was wrapped tight, but it still throbbed with every step. In his hands was a sword, not his preferred metal rod, but the weapon tradition demanded for the final fight. Across the arena, Gorvik emerged from his own entrance. The Titanborn wore no armor at all. His stone-like skin was protection enough, and he carried a massive warhammer that looked like it could crush a car. The crowd was louder than ever. Even the wealthy aliens, who usually maintained their dignity, were screaming and cheering. This was history in the making. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed across the arena, "the final contest, Gorvik the Titanborn, undefeated. In 57 battles, against Jake the Human, the impossible survivor. Lord Vexthera sat in his place of honor, but he looked like he might be sick. His hands were shaking and sweat was dripping down his blue face despite the cool air. Everything he had worked for, everything he was, depended on the next few minutes." Lady Serana watched with calm eyes, but inside her heart was racing. Freedom was so close she could almost taste it. "Begin," the announcer shouted. Gorvik moved. With surprising speed for someone so large, his hammer swung in perfect arcs, missing Jake by inches and leaving craters in the arena floor. The Titanborn wasn't just strong, he was skilled, experienced, and completely focused. Jake tried his usual strategy of studying his opponent, looking for weaknesses and patterns. But Gorvik was too good. Every movement was efficient, controlled, deadly. There were no obvious flaws to exploit. The fight continued for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Jake used every trick he had learned, every advantage the arena could provide. Climbed walls, hid behind obstacles, even tried to collapse part of the maze on his opponent. Nothing worked. Gorvik adapted to every strategy, countered every move. Slowly but surely, Jake was being worn down. His injured leg was getting worse. His strength was fading. His sword felt heavier with each swing. Finally, Jake made a mistake. He zigged when he should have zagged, and Gorvik's hammer caught him in the shoulder. The impact sent Jake flying across the arena to crash against a wall. His sword went spinning away into the darkness. The crowd held its breath as Jake struggled. To get up, his left arm hung useless at his side, probably broken. His leg finally gave out completely, leaving him on his knees in front of the approaching Titanborn. "It is over," Gorvik said, raising his hammer for the final blow. "Oh, you fought with more honor than I expected." But as Jake knelt there, beaten and exhausted, his engineer's mind made one last observation. Gorvik's stone skin, which had seemed so impenetrable, was covered with tiny cracks. It's not damage from their fight, but stress fractures that had been. Building over years of combat, Jake had seen similar patterns in metal structures that were approaching their breaking point. The cracks followed the lines of greatest stress, all converging toward a single point on Gorvik's chest. Right over his heart, with his last remaining strength, Jake lunged forward, not to attack, but to touch that one critical point with his fingertip. The effect was immediate and shocking. The stress fractures, which had been held in balance for so long, suddenly cascaded outward like a spiderweb. Gorvik's natural armor didn't just crack, it shattered completely. The mighty Titanborn, undefeated champion of the arena, collapsed like a building with its foundation removed. He wasn't dead, but he was finished. His legendary stone skin lay in pieces around him, leaving him as vulnerable as any ordinary being. The arena was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. Then, somewhere in the crowd, one alien started clapping, then another. Soon the entire arena erupted in the loudest cheers Jake had ever heard. He had done it. Impossible had happened. The wounded human engineer had defeated the greatest gladiator in the galaxy, Lord Vexthera S. Face went through every emotion possible in the span of seconds: disbelief, rage, terror, and finally, complete defeat. His bet was lost. His wife was free. His life as he knew it was over. Lady Serana stood up slowly, her silver eyes shining with tears of joy. After years of imprisonment, she was finally free, but Jake barely noticed any of it. He collapsed next to the defeated Gorvik, both warriors. Exhausted and broken, but somehow, against all odds, still alive. The silence in the arena lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like forever. Then chaos erupted everywhere at once. Half the crowd was cheering wildly, jumping up and down in their floating seats. These were the aliens who had bet on Jake despite the impossible odds, and they had just become incredibly wealthy. The other half sat in stunned silence, watching their fortunes disappear before their eyes. But the loudest reaction came from the nobles section, where Lord Vexthara's political enemies were celebrating like they had won the lottery. For years they had endured his arrogance and cruel jokes. Now they were watching him lose everything in the most public way possible. Jake barely noticed any of it. He was lying on the arena floor next to Gorvik, both of them exhausted and hurt. The massive Titanborn was conscious but looked completely lost, like someone who had just discovered that everything they believed about themselves was wrong. How Gorvik whispered, staring at the pieces of his broken stone skin scattered around them. "Stress fractures," Jake replied weakly. "You're incredibly strong, but even the strongest materials have limits." Years of fighting created tiny cracks that all led to one weak point. Gorvik was quiet for a long moment. "I was told I was unbreakable." "Nothing is unbreakable," Jake said. "Everything has flaws. That's not a weakness, it just means you're real." Medical teams rushed into the arena to treat both fighters. As they carried Jake away on a floating stretcher, he caught sight of Lord Vexthara in the nobles section. The alien lord looked like his entire world had just collapsed, because it had. Within hours of Jake's victory, Lord Vexthara's life began falling apart completely. The Gaming Commission immediately declared the bet official and legally binding. Lady Serana was free to dissolve their marriage and claim her inheritance, which included several star systems, a private fleet of ships, and more wealth than most planets possessed. But that was just the beginning of Vexthara's problems. News of the bet and its outcome spread across the galaxy faster than lightspeed communication could carry it. Within days, every major news network was running the story of the arrogant alien noble who bet his wife on a crippled human and lost. The reaction from the Celestial Court was swift and brutal. Vexthara's political connections, which had taken him decades to build, vanished overnight. No one wanted to be associated with someone who had become a galaxy-wide joke. His business partners canceled their contracts. His allies pretended they had never known him. Even his own servants started looking for new jobs. "Sir," his chief advisor said nervously, "perhaps we could challenge the bet in court, claim it was made under unusual circumstances." Vexthara's laugh was bitter and hollow. "Challenge it? You know who sits on the Gaming Commission? 3 of them are Lady Serana's cousins, and 2 more have been waiting years for a chance to humiliate me. They would rather die than overturn this ruling." Meanwhile, Lady Serana was experiencing freedom for the first time in years. The slow poison that had been keeping her weak was finally leaving her system, and she felt stronger with each passing day. Her first official act as an independent noble was to purchase Jake's complete freedom from the arena's contracts. Her second act was to offer him a job. "You could work for me," she explained as they met in her newly claimed flagship. "I need someone I can trust, someone who thinks differently than everyone else in my world." Jake was still recovering from his injuries, sitting in a comfortable chair that adjusted to support his healing leg. "What kind of work? Security consulting? Strategy planning? Problem solving?" She smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Jake had seen from her. The kind of thinking that just defeated 3 impossible opponents. "And what about him?" asked, nodding toward a corner of the room where Gorvik sat quietly. The former champion had been freed from his gladiatorial contracts as well, thanks to the chaos following the bet. But freedom was a new concept for someone who had been created in a laboratory and trained only to fight. "I have offered him a position as well," Serana said. Every good security team needs someone with his physical capabilities. Gorvik looked up at the mention of his name. I do not know how to do anything except fight. Then you'll learn, Jake said. Just like I learned to fight. We'll figure it out together. It was a strange partnership. A human engineer, an alien noble, and a genetically created warrior. But somehow it worked. As for Lord Vexera, his fall from grace continued to accelerate. The enormous debts from his gambling losses piled up faster than he could pay them. His luxury ship was seized by creditors. His properties were sold at auction. Within weeks, he went from being one of the most powerful nobles in the galaxy to being essentially bankrupt. His final humiliation came when he was forced to take a job managing cargo shipments on the outer rim of civilized space. It was honest work, but for someone who had once commanded star systems, it felt like the ultimate punishment. The last time Jake saw him was at a space station where their ships happened to dock at the same time. Vexera looked older, tired, and much less arrogant than before. He approached Jake hesitantly, like he wasn't sure if he would be welcomed. I wanted to apologize, the former lord said quietly. What I did to you, what I put you through, ... it was wrong. Jake studied the alien who had once held his life in his hands. You know what the funny thing is? If you hadn't made that bet, Lady Serana would still be trapped, Gorvik would still be fighting in arenas, and I'd probably be dead. Sometimes the worst decisions lead to the best outcomes. Vexera nodded sadly and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of ordinary travelers. He had learned the hardest lesson of all, that cruelty and arrogance eventually come back to destroy the people who practice them. Months later, Jake found himself standing on the bridge of Lady Serana's flagship, looking out at the stars. Leg had healed completely, though he still walked with a slight limp. Gorvik stood nearby, no longer the unstoppable gladiator, but a friend who was learning that there was more to life than fighting. Do you ever regret it? Joina asked. Joining them at the window. The whole experience, I mean. If you could go back and avoid that pirate attack, would you? Jake thought about it seriously. 6 months ago, I was just a guy who fixed engines. I had a simple life, a simple job, simple problems. Now I'm traveling the galaxy, solving problems I never imagined, working with people I never could have. Medi paused, watching a distant planet slowly rotate beneath them. The pirates took my old life away, he continued, but they also gave me a chance to become something more than I ever thought possible. So no, I don't regret it. Even the terrible parts led to something better. Gorvik rumbled in agreement. I spent my entire existence believing I was just a weapon. Now I am learning to be a person. It is ... difficult, but good. Lady Serana smiled, the poison completely gone from her system and her spirit finally free. Sometimes the universe has strange ways of giving us exactly what we need, even when we don't know we need it. Their ship continued its journey through space, carrying 3 unlikely friends toward whatever adventures awaited them. Behind them, in the distance, a small cargo vessel carried a former lord who was finally learning what it meant to work for a living. The galaxy was a big place, full of dangers and wonders and possibilities, but for the first time in his life, Jake felt ready for whatever came next. He had learned that being smart was often better than being strong, that friendship could be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the best way to win was simply to refuse to give up. The stars stretched endlessly ahead of them, full of promise and hope.